So a question that you have to figure out for your future ETS registration applications, and which also means for your future forest planting and planning, given that you probably care about ETS registration, is which LUC classifications should you use, and when do you need to decide how to use them? And the reason I say which is that there are two options available. You can either use the region level or national level mappings, which are basically fairly coarse mappings that are available nationally, or you can choose to acquire and use a farm level LUC mapping, which is much higher resolution and will much better capture the specifics of your farm, which interestingly will not necessarily be a good thing for you, depending on where you plan to plant and what you plan to plant and what your situation was under the two different maps. So you do have to choose one as soon as you start to do anything that relies on the LUC status or exemptions. And you need to do this at the latest when you make the first application that depends on an LUC category for a given title. It's also tricky because it doesn't necessarily require you to be planting on that title. How that title is treated in terms of an individual farm, which is an aggregation of several titles potentially that are adjacent and under the same ownership, could mean that even though you're not planting on an area, it sort of gets pulled in and you have to make a choice on the mapping. Once you've chosen, basically you can't change. There's no using the regional map for one application and then the farm level map for another application and then the regional map again on a different title and mixing and matching. You have to pick one and stick with it. And this one here is really complicated, is that the 25% exemption can only be used effectively by one owner, and it has implications beyond the title because of the way it's calculated against an individual farm. So how to choose? Firstly, consider if and where you might want to establish exotic forest now and into the future. Assess that against the New Zealand Land Resources Institute map, like national level LUC, and also assess it against the property scale map if you have one. If you don't have one, you need to decide whether it might be worth your time to get one. And I'm saying all of this as though you should just be able to figure this out. I realize all of these decisions are hard. That's part of what we're building tooling to help with, which I'll share a little on later. Sorry, I'm repeating myself here. Now choose an option per title, some caveats on the extent to which you can do it per title, but pick based on what best suits your plans given the constraints that exist, essentially. As I said, do this before your first registration on the individual farm, which includes that title. And remember that the region level erosion maps may also give you another path to like unrestriction, essentially, which is, and they're independent of the farm level LUC versus the region level LUC maps. And I'll show that how that could work in a moment. So in the words of Maximus Decimus Meridius, the ETS LUC choice you make echoes in eternity, which sounded hilarious when we were talking about it internally, but it's very hard to tell jokes to a silent webinar. So hopefully at least one person laughed.